Okay, thanks, Pat. Good evening and welcome to the Sherborn Board of Selectmen meeting of July 11th, 2013. We did not have an executive session. There was no quorum down there, so we're starting fresh in open session here. And if David, our town administrator, could read the agenda as currently drafted and posted.
Thank you. At 6 o'clock, consideration of consent agenda. That would include selectmen minutes, approval of warrants, and approval of fire chief contract of the new fire chief, Tim Morrissey, approval of internal borrowing from the town treasurer, and then set the next meeting date, which I believe would be July 25th.
Okay.
Then public comment. And then at 6:15, we have Jay Marsden, the selectman from Holliston, in to talk about the Metro West Anti-Casino Coalition. 6:45, Corey Lincoln in, town moderator, to talk about the governance task force. 7 o'clock, consideration of appointments. We're looking at Council on Aging, Energy Committee, Oil Burner Inspector, Sherborn Police Department, Police Matrons. And at 7:15, administrative reports, where we can preview what things are coming up in future meetings.
Okay. And I would like to add an amendment to this agenda where just down in the 7:15 section of reports from town officials, before you go, David, to have the town accountant give us a preliminary fiscal 2013 financial report. She's issued it in written form. We got it late this afternoon. I doubt you gents have even had a chance to look at it, but she'll come and give us the highlights. So
Sounds good.
I'd like to make that amendment to the agenda.
Second.
Any other amendments, gents? So I'll take a motion to approve the agenda as amended for that financial report.
Thank you.
So moved.
Moved.
All right, second. No, all in favor? Here we go.
We're at a
Great,
practice
off we go.
speed.
Yeah, I know,
We're
it's
not quite
fine.
as quick, yeah.
It's, that's okay. Okay, so we have some consideration of consent items. I move that we accept the minutes of May 30th, June 13th, and June 28th. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor? Great. On the warrants, I would move approval of warrant 54, one of the last ones of fiscal 2013, in the amount of $164,351.72. And I'll do that separately, subject to review by David. And I would like to hold out one item there, which is this tree item. David, I think it's in this warrant that we discussed briefly. So if you could just hold that out. So I'll take a motion
Second.
or second on that. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Great. And I would move for approval of warrant number 2, fiscal 14, in the amount of $900,814.79. Do I hear a second on that?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Thanks. Okay, then, nice job, David, on getting through and working with Timothy Morrissey, our new fire chief, and working through the contract issues quickly, expeditiously, and sounds like there were really no issues to get through on that, so great job. So I would take a motion to approve our signature of approval of this contract that we will sign here this evening.
With great pleasure.
Okay,
I
do I hear a
would move
second?
to approve this.
Excellent. Okay, all in favor? Here we go. Great
Good.
job by the town of Sherborn for putting this
So
together,
we now have a fire
gentlemen.
chief.
We have a fire chief, and he'll be starting when, David?
August 5th.
August 5th. Great. Yeah, great
Those
choice.
were
That's exciting.
Fireworks going off at our existing fire chief's house.
Yes, yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, Neil has certainly carried the ball for us quite well, and we can't thank him enough on that.
And was helpful through this process.
Absolutely. Yep. Well, that's great. Thank you, gentlemen. We've done
Just to
that.
remind everybody, he starts August 5, right?
That's right, yes.
So that's 2 weeks. It's about 3
Pretty
weeks.
close to it, 3 weeks, yep. I think we better sign these while we're also talking and approving. Okay, approval of internal borrowing. So, David, can I ask you to read the required motion for us? That I will move the motion that David's about to read. How's that?
Sure.
Okay. Do you have that, David, from Pete?
I didn't see that.
Yeah, it's bad if I take mine.
Oh, okay, there we go. Required motion is move the approval of an advance
sorry.
of funds in lieu of borrowing totaling $5,500 dated July 11th, 2013 for funding of item 2 of Article 8 of the 2013 annual town meeting, the purchase of a fire department computer server, and the approval of an advance of funds in lieu of borrowing totaling $10,075 dated July 11th, 2013 for funding of item 4 of Article 8 of the 2013 annual town meeting, a solar crosswalk, and the approval of an advance of funds in lieu of borrowing totaling $30,000 dated July 11th, 2013 for funding of item 6 of Article 8 of the 2013 annual town meeting, the purchase of a pickup truck for CM&D.
Great, so I've moved that motion as David read it. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Can we, can you, somebody just explain what we're doing here so that everybody's clear?
Good idea.
As far as I know, bond council requires a vote in open meeting on every borrowing that the selectmen, the treasurer takes.
We're borrowing here for items that were approved at the previous town meeting.
These were all
That's
capital
correct.
items that were approved at town meeting and then at the ballot box for
Okay.
the.
And we're internally funding it rather than going out and issuing debt
That's the part I
for the
wanted,
time being,
yeah.
because it's small dollar items.
Okay, so we're internally funding it from other available funds that we have?
That's correct, in lieu of borrowing.
Oh,
Yep.
I'm sorry, I said
So we're
bond
borrowing
council.
from ourselves.
Okay, good.
So I'm going to sign that. We'll have everybody give a,
Shouldn't we vote first?
oh. I move, and I moved, it's seconded, all in favor?
All right.
All right. Thank you. That's why it's good to have attorneys on the board here who keep track of these things.
Or bad to have them on board.
Well, you never hear me say that. Okay, so we're not scheduled to have a meeting next week. David's going to be out. It will be another short warrant that we can handle on the desktop there.
Yes.
And so we'll meet again on July 25th, and we'll be talking about the upcoming meeting topics later on the agenda. Right?
Okay, sure.
Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. All right, so this is time for public comment. Are there any comments from the fine folks in the audience tonight? It's good to see some familiar faces. Okay, that's great. Well, while we wait for our friend, Mr. Jay Marston from Holliston as a selectman there, you want to go through some appointments, David? Shall we just do those?
Sure.
And you've provided us a schedule like before, which shows all of the folks under consideration, and then basically you've helped simplify the process by showing which individuals to appoint or reappoint in the term of expiration. So that's very helpful. So if you would just read that, what we're doing here, we have council on, we have election workers per the town clerk. Let's go through that, I'm sorry. We have a memo dated July 3rd from Carol Marple describing the state law for election of officers in towns, and she's appointing election workers, basically. And she's compiled a list. It's a lengthy list of a page and a half, which would be a matter of public record. So I would move we accept and approve this list as attached to the memo by Carol Marple, Town Clerk, dated July 3rd. Do I hear a second? Or any questions?
I do have a question. It says the selectmen may appoint as an election officers who are registered voters of the town recommended by the town clerk. I noticed one of these folks has a Millis
Millis,
address, and
yeah.
I just want to make sure that somebody can confirm that they're a registered voter of Sherborn.
Good question. So do you want to hold that one out? We have until, as I read this, August 15th. So I would amend my motion to exclude the individual from Millis until further information is provided. Okay. Does that work for
Second.
you, Paul?
Yes.
Second. So we're moved and seconded. All those in favor? Great. You got that, Diane?
Yeah.
All right. So then we're boards and committee members. Back to David's schedule. I apologize for taking things out of
No
order.
problem. Council on Aging you had already done, but there was a little bit of confusion on who was an existing member and who required an appointment. So there was actually a new member who was on the committee that we thought had already been appointed, but in fact, she hasn't. So she's being appointed now as a new committee person, or new council person, for a 2-year appointment till June 15th, 2015. And then that will take care of the whole Council on Aging.
So
Okay.
can I make that motion that Tricia M. Caldecott be appointed to the Council on Aging for a term to expire June 15, 2015?
Second.
Okay, great. All in favor? Great.
Then the next one is Energy Committee.
Yep.
There were 5 seats that were up for renewal. We had 4 applicants for those 5 seats, and those 4 applicants were all reappointments. Gino Carlucci for 3 years, Jane Push for 3 years, Keisha Lifferton for 2 years, and Michael Lesser for 2 years.
And that would leave us with 3 vacancies, basically, of the
Yes.
9-member committee. Yep, okay. Paul, did you want to make a motion?
Yeah, I move the names and the terms that the town administrator just read.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor? Great.
I would hope we could find somebody to fill that.
That's a great
missing
committee.
slot. That committee's, just needs somebody with some energy, and we'll be all
You
set.
practiced that, Joe. That was a good
It
one.
was good. It was better than the one you told us.
That
2
was
weeks
a
ago.
lot better than the one I told.
My plan is to get through the appointment process.
And then go
And then I
out.
have a list of all the vacancies, and then
Great.
start just pushing hard to fill those vacancies.
Are we going to do the oil burner inspector
Yep.
and the police department matrons at the bottom of the sheet?
Yes. The oil burner inspector, Rick Aston, for a term of 2 years to expire June 15th, 2014. And we'll probably be reappointing the new fire chief in this, but where this is an expired appointment, I would prefer to go ahead and appoint him, since he's been doing the job, until such time that the new chief can take it over.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Great.
You say that's 1 year?
2014 is 1 year,
For
not 2
the oil
years.
burner.
Well, it expired in 2012, June 15th, 2012, so for 2 years,
To expire the 14th.
it'll expire June 15th, 2014.
Yep.
That's just,
Yes,
Great, good housekeeping. Okay, and then we have the 2 matrons here that recommended by the chief.
Yes, I move that we appoint Roxanne Butler and Evelyn Corbett as police department matrons.
It's Buckler, isn't it?
Buckler.
Yeah.
How long is the term?
It's 1 year, to expire on June 15th, 2014.
Second.
All those in favor? Well done, gents. Okay,
Chief Thompson and I are also talking to council about the appointments of the officers and the chief and the matrons every year, to see if that's something that's actually required. Chief has a certain contract that goes for a certain time. But we're looking into that, and we may be able to reduce some of those.
and so that could include the police officers, trying to appoint them for a longer period of time, basically, than
Right,
what we do
right.
every year.
Maybe something that corresponds with their contract.
Gotcha. Oh,
Every
that-
year.
that makes sense, right, right, okay, good. I guess while we're awaiting our guest, David, we can go down into your section if that works for you, it works for me. Talk to us about your space reorganization and committee reorganization, and the committee reorganization follows what we just did, so that's a nice segue. Excuse me, segue.
Yeah, for the committees, I was looking to get the appointments done, then start advertising to fill the vacant seats. Then we were going to send out a survey to the committees to see what they've been working on, what their goals are for the coming year, and then work out a schedule to start bringing those committees in, so that they're periodically coming into the selectmen to keep you informed of what's going on,
Yes.
and you can give input on what they're working on. So that's a long process.
But we also have other committees which we have not yet done appointments for, that you're taking a closer look at.
Right.
We'll talk about, and then bring forth to the board here.
There are a number
what
of
some thoughts are.
committees that are generally related to each other.
Yeah.
And then there's the Traffic Safety Committee that's in the bylaw. So we want to have a discussion about those at a future date to see which ones could be either moved to a task force or continue as a committee before we
Right.
reappoint them. A couple of them, the existing fire chief is recommending that they be sunsetted completely, such as the dry hydrant committee. If there's a full-time fire chief, do we really need a dry hydrant committee?
And that
So
would
that-
be consistent with DOR recommendations that we're aware of and so forth, reducing the
Right,
number of
right.
committees and making them more efficient and
Sure.
hopefully effective. So that'll be a great discussion. I'm glad you're looking through that. You're good with these, you've signed all.
For office space, I was looking at how the town hall office space is allocated. There's one corner of the building that's heavily weighted down from people, file cabinets on the second floor. And thinking about putting those land use entities on the first floor with the other public counters and having a person act as a permit coordinator, which would be a current admin person, not a new position. Just kind of repurpose that position. And that person will also be be responsible for implementing the People GIS system that was approved last year that we're still trying to implement. And so that would put all the land use people in one area, basically conservation, building, planning, and Board of Health, down on the first floor with the other customer service counters. And then move the Board of Selectmen offices up to this corner of the building where they were previously held, and pull the town accountant out of the treasurer's office, move her in with the Board of Selectmen, so there's a better tie with the finances on our end. So that's how the drawing looks now. Walter Avalon has come up with scaled drawings of everybody's cabinets. There's about 200 square feet more downstairs for space than there is upstairs.
And they're
where there-
bursting at the seams up here, right? Yeah.
It's pretty crazy in there. And another issue that a number of people have complained to me about is that the office hours are varied, and these people mostly are in the field. Well, not mostly in the field, but they have set office hours that they're there a couple hours a day, and the rest they're out in the field. So sometimes a member of the public can walk in there, and there's nobody there.
I see.
So by changing where there's a front-end person of an admin person, they could still come and go as they please, but there would be one person accountable for where they're at.
And responding to the public's needs that
Right.
Are frequent.
Right, and that
Right.
position would still be under the Board of Selectmen as they
Yeah.
are now.
So you've thought this out pretty carefully, and you've addressed it with the various individuals who would be impacted by this move, and from
Everybody-
my understanding, it's pretty, it's.
Everybody
taken
thought it was a
favor.
good idea. They were supportive of it. There are a couple of logistical things to work out. But yeah, I think everyone was generally open to it. So once it ferments, I'll bring something more solid in for you guys to see and review.
Sure. Would that include the Board of Appeals also with the other boards?
Yes.
You consolidate, good, yeah, you mentioned them, but
Right.
that's a good idea.
In my head, that's already down there.
Yeah.
Yes.
It is, yeah,
Yeah.
it's just not with the other ones.
Right.
The other question is, does that provide an opportunity for a single point of collection for permit fees and filing fees and so forth, rather than different boards and different offices?
Yeah, that would be an opportunity, yeah.
Good.
Yeah. It's a model that's common in some other small towns. I know in Weston it was reorganized to do, all these people had a front-end service desk with admin. I think it's common in a number of towns. So it seemed here that based on the space that it was a good model to follow. So,
It makes some sense.
Well, it makes great sense to me. I don't know what you think on this, Paul, because, it's moving the Board of Selectmen's office to the back corner of the building here. Hopefully, our desk gets a better view than the wall, but I doubt that.
you will get a window in that room,
Oh.
yeah, as opposed to the,
Well, I don't much care about the view, but I do care that the public be served.
Yeah.
right.
When people come in, often our office is the only one that's open.
Mhm.
And so there's a reason why we were on the ground floor,
Mhm.
because we were here.
Mhm.
And if you take our office and take them out of the ground floor, people might come in and think that they're in empty warehouse. I mean,
Right, right,
and not realize if they go upstairs, there might be
yeah.
life up there in the corner.
Yeah, I have thought about that, and that it would still be a Board of Selectmen employee that's working that front end. Currently, her hours go to about 2 or 3 o'clock. So it would be covering the rest of that afternoon. And maybe it's, maybe we have to work out a schedule where Diane goes down there for the afternoon or something like that. But I'm looking at coverage so that hopefully doesn't happen that way.
And a lot of the activity that comes to that window is unrelated to the selectmen's or town administrator activities. Wouldn't that be a fair statement?
Yeah, from what I,
You mean like buying
You know, it's.
pond stickers and things like that?
Yeah, well, it's just all sorts of things. Electricians come in, or I don't know what comes in first thing in the morning, but you're forever dealing with these contractors that
They want to talk to
aren't
Walter.
our office, but they have to deal with Diane, or, because that's the place that's open. So with Jeannie there and that group there, that may solve a lot of that.
yeah. So I'll take that into account and then look at when I bring the final plan, actually show the hours of, the coverage that would be down there.
I'm
So
just recounting historically why.
why it happened that way.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you wanted somebody there who could see, I mean, from the selectman's office, from Diane's desk, she can see down
Yeah, the
the
hallway,
hall,
yeah.
towards the front door. And whoever is gonna be in that office, they really need to be there from like 8 to 4, and they need
Right.
they need to be open.
yeah,
The alternative that we've done in one of my other town halls is that we have one of these senior citizen persons sitting as a receptionist. We put a desk in the middle of the hallway,
yeah,
and people come in and ask her, where do we go?
Yeah.
yeah,
And she steers them, oh, there's an office up there, there's an office up there. But if you don't have anybody, if the selectman's office goes dark,
right,
and they come in and the whole down to first floor is dark, it may be bright as a Christmas tree up here, and we may
Yeah.
be humming away,
yeah,
but will they know to go upstairs
right.
and find us?
Yeah, that's a good point. So, I mean, I would expect the goal is to have the window open down there with somebody in there until the 5 o'clock hours that we already have. And maybe it's the conservation agent that sets her office hours for the afternoon or something. I'm trying to look at it more and flesh it out.
So that's still in progress, what the final plan is, but you're moving along,
Yeah, well,
you've moved it along quite a bit here.
yeah, space-wise, it works. And I
Okay.
thought customer service-wise, it would,
Be better.
yeah.
And the Board of Health folks and the Walters of the world, all, and conservation folks, all are embracing this move, for the most part. I don't mean to
Embracing
put
is
words
a-
in any,
There were
support the move.
90% were very supportive. One had more concerns than the other, and we're trying to address
Okay.
every one of those
Yeah,
concerns.
that's good.
So, but nobody said no, that they didn't think that it would be a good idea.
Okay.
Well, it helped to see all the information you have in the
Yeah.
drawings, I think.
Yeah, we'll bring up the map, we'll bring the scheduling and have them in here talk about it. and,
Right.
So that's what I've been looking at for a couple of months, actually.
Yeah.
So,
And one of the prime objectives you have is to have you in the same room with the town accountant, or close by to the town accountant, so that you
just to,
have greater interaction on a
Yeah,
daily basis.
yeah, I mean, where I've been in the past, I've had a lot easier access to finances than I do here, and I don't know if it's the technology, that we have compared to what I've used in other towns, but I figured if I was in closer proximity in the same room, some miscommunication things might not fall through the cracks.
So the books are not accessible to you on your desktop?
I can access, yeah, I can. I have an inquiry access, yeah, yeah. But it's still different to see the warrant for the first time as opposed to watching it being done and being able to answer a question when it comes up, like, what is this?
Sure.
So,
Well, I know I support what David's doing, just using, we brought in Tom Brady here, and we brought him in for his good ideas as well, and different vantage point. And so I support what you're trying to do. I think most of it makes sense. It won't be without some glitches, it's change.
mhm.
And, you know, we have to be sensitive to exactly what Paul described.
Right,
Because
right.
we are a service business,
Right.
basically. So
And that
we are.
hadn't been explained to me or pointed out to me that that was the purpose why the
Yeah.
Board of Selectmen was located there in the first place.
Yeah.
That's good
So
information.
that's good. All right, well, we'll keep moving along, I guess. Want to talk about upcoming meeting topics? I see you have the Revenue Development Committee coming in
Yeah,
2
they're scheduled
weeks.
for the July 25th.
Yep,
They have some issues that they want to discuss online, and then some other issues that they may just do in a memo format for us to schedule as a later discussion.
right.
I have a topic I want to
Excellent.
get done, which is the paving of the transfer station. This is one that's way overdue, a couple of years overdue, and we had to put off till July 1 so that the funding would become available.
Mhm.
But things are pretty grim over there. There's a lot of holes and loose rock, and
Mhm.
people could fall or injure themselves, and it's not attractive.
Mhm.
And we want to encourage people to come and bring their waste
Mhm.
and to process it. And we as a community should have enough pride in ourselves. We
Mhm.
want to have a cleaned up operation. So
Yeah.
the point of this is to encourage you to get that done as fast
Yeah,
as possible.
Actually, I've been working with Carol on that. They had the recycling committee had a certain direction and that they wanted to go. We also have a town contracted vendor that was contracted through the MAPC. So the recycling, I was waiting for a clear okay from the recycling committee to say, yeah, go ahead and get a contract done with our existing vendor, because it seemed like they wanted to do an outside process, which would be putting it out to bid on our own, which would be like another 6 weeks to compare prices. And so I did give Carol something in writing this week, recommending that they go with our vendor, and gave them some reasons why we can levy the rest of our contracts for paving in town to make sure that they do a good job, plus other communities that have signed on with that MAPC contract.
But she already had 2 bids.
She had
which
2
were
quotes.
provided. Oh, quotes, okay, quotes, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but I mean, the procurement laws for public works over 25,000
Yep.
requires a certain
Actually,
process.
Yeah, yeah.
Can I ask why the recycling committee is taking charge of the transfer station and the paving of the transfer station?
Well, I talked to Carol earlier about having CM&D oversee that actual process of doing that paving. But it wasn't until last night when the recycling committee met that I've gotten a green light to go ahead with the town's vendor. But it is something that
I guess that
did
still
take some time.
raises the question why they're giving the green light. What's their control over the transfer station?
Well-
That's a advisory committee on recycling, right?
At the same time, I've asked to look up the charge of the recycling committee to see who's supposed to be doing what.
I think, I mean, I think it makes more sense when we talk about consolidating functions. I would think it would make more sense for the town to have those kinds of functions within CM&D rather than under a separate special purpose committee.
That's what I would recommend, but I'm trying to put this stuff together to be able to
Sure.
form that recommendation, but you're already there, so.
Yeah, I mean,
So I think, typically that's the model in other places, and just in Sherborn, you get, the committees are moving along and moving their issues along and taking responsibility for things, so. Never looked at that.
We had a lot of discussion on the transfer station before your time. And what I discovered was or concluded, was that the recycling committee by default and lack of anybody else really paying attention moved in and did a lot on behalf of the residents of the town with the transfer station, but technically under contract, it's the town administrator's duty and responsibility to oversee what's going on over there, and that just wasn't the practice. And,
mean,
we have somebody capable now to do that
Yeah, I was gonna say, we have a
practice.
capable town administrator, we have a capable CM&D
Right.
director,
Right.
and I thought
So I'm
Carol
with
Carol
you.
did
I
a
agree with
wonderful
you.
job at
Yeah.
town meeting of explaining the
Right.
need for that project, and that was good citizen advocacy and good work by her
Right.
committee, but I don't think, I see some mission
Not
creep
her
here,
responsibility, yeah.
and I'm not really comfortable with it.
Yeah, so I didn't want to just go ahead and sign a contract and pave the thing without
Sure.
having their buy-in
Oh,
completely.
I'm not being critical of how you
No, no,
handled
no,
it
no.
either, I just think for sort of future clarity on who does what, we ought to nail that down.
Yeah, yeah, and there are a number of, there are a couple of recycling contracts that Carol spent a lot of time on, going out looking for other vendors besides the existing ones to see if we can get a little more money on the recyclables.
Mhm.
And the operation contract up there, I think, expired a year or two ago, and so that needs to be redone.
Okay.
Right.
So-
So we've just been carrying on under the old contract, basically. But even under that, the terms are pretty clear that, you know, the responsibility really rests with our town administrator. So you're right on, and it's all part of this government structure discussion that we
Right.
ultimately will have too.
I'm sure they want to
Classic.
focus on paving the transportation in that committee.
Well,
Um,
yeah.
I had another, did you raise your items, Paul, or?
Well, just to finalize this, I don't want the paving getting lost in the
Yeah.
red tape over
Right.
who's in charge and who's on first base and all of that. Paving is pretty simple. It just needs to get paved.
Yeah.
So can we set a date goal to satisfy everybody, because then we run against weather issues?
Well, the problem was, the contractor that I had with the quote, I didn't want to just go into that facility and pave it,
Yes.
so they needed to do some research and discuss it more and look at their own quotes and read my recommendation about why I would go this route, and, you know, I think they've bought into it now. But there shouldn't be any holdup now, because they're in for the quick route, which isn't we already have a contract with this paver. You know, that's
Sure.
not, there's no holdup, there's no procurement process that we need to follow. It's already in place, so.
Excellent.
And I had one thing to raise too, Peter, if you were.
Please do.
Have a
If Paul's
quick
good.
second for, and I raised this with David earlier, but I understand that the Comcast internet service cut out at Town Hall today because of a problem out of town that affected Sherborn. I know I've had that experience at home.
Yeah.
Personally, I think others in town have too, and I'm wondering if we should ask Comcast to come in and explain to us what can be done to have more reliable service for the town.
I think that's a great idea, because frequently it cuts out here at Town Hall. It doesn't as frequently cut out at my home, but it did today. So I think your point's well taken.
Yeah.
Something's not right.
Yeah, and
With the service.
I think sometimes you need to say something to get that kind of attention for a small town.
Yeah.
Well,
I
if
think
I
that's
could
a great
add
idea.
something to this, the Comcast contract is up for renewal, and should be coming up on the milestone item of a public needs assessment, which is a public hearing to determine what needs the community has. And this kind of issue is exactly one that should surface in that framework.
Yeah.
It's designed to pick up these issues and to have them addressed in the license renewal process. I think we've got like a year left on that contract.
Right.
And we did hire special counsel to assist us with that.
Right.
So to the extent that we're having problems, number one, an email to our counsel should bring that to his attention. And number two, very soon, we're gonna have to have this hearing. So our cable committee should be probably in the fall coming to us and asking us to set up a big public hearing so that people can come in and tell us what the needs of the community are. So it's every license renewal process. Oh, you know more about this stuff probably than I do.
Yeah, no, but that makes sense. I think we should do that.
Excellent. So Diane, Elliot has his hand up. I'd love to hear from
Go
you.
back to the transfer station a minute.
Please do.
When they first opened the transfer station, I mentioned that the driveway was a little bit narrow and having trouble cars coming in and out. One of the board members kind of questioned my narrowness. I think the next Sunday morning, I met him coming in as I was coming out. And we had to do a little maneuvering. He said, yeah, Elliot, you're right. Before we started paving project, are the people that work down there satisfied with the width of this driveway? If they're having any problems with it, why, this might be the time to add a foot or two.
Are you talking about the entrance, or are you talking about the drive-up hump?
Well, let's say the whole thing, but the entrance, basically.
The gate.
The ones who work down there have to handle the trucking, the trucks that are coming in and whatever.
Right,
And my thought was, before we go into a big paving project, if another foot or so here and there, this would be the time to do it.
yeah,
So I mentioned it for what it's worth.
yeah, no, you're right, it's only wide enough for maybe two cars. It's not wide enough for two trucks to get through there. So, I'll have them look at it, and maybe we can move the gates apart a little bit.
Well, it's important to listen to Elliot. It's the moral of the story of that one, I'd say.
Well, I've lived in this town for 70, I don't know, I've run out of fingers, years. And I do, not really intelligence, just experience.
Appreciate
And
that.
I know a few things.
Perfect. That's great.
You may want to take Corey rather than wait for.
Well, we will. I
the
just,
Holliston guy. He's
we're-
kind of forfeited his time.
That's
He's
right.
supposed to be here at 6:15.
That's right. We're gonna get to
Half hour
Corey. David, you're done with the future meetings, or do you want to just hit those other two real quickly here, just to let us know? We know, you tentatively scheduled this public safety residency requirement discussion. That's
Right,
where Paul has raised the question, and what's the state rules and so forth. So
Right.
we can have that discussion, and you'll do some homework in advance of that, I guess.
Yeah.
And likewise, third-party assessments and hiring in the next meeting, or one of the next meetings, just to talk about whether we should have a real specific policy or not.
yeah,
This is
I mean,
what
I
we
think the options are, do you implement a policy that is automatically kicked in, that it's the policy that we have to follow, that's in the personnel action plan?
Yep,
Or personnel administration plan?
yep.
Or do you go, allow the board to
So that'll
set
be
the
a
policy
healthy,
for every
that'll be a
hiring?
healthy discussion, and you'll have some alternative approaches and so forth for
Yeah,
us to weigh in on.
The personnel board did look at it,
Okay,
I don't know if it was last week, early last week.
yeah,
I think the cost factor would also be an interesting thing to compare on that too, David.
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, lots of times you don't know about these major, if it's a retirement that's coming up, you can plan on it. If it's a retiring division head or something, then you can put something in the budget for a major assessment center.
Great,
But if you don't know, and you have to use your existing budget, the selectmen would have to decide, do you hold a special town meeting, or do you pay for it out of your professional services line, or, how you would pay for that? Or do you go with something smaller like we did this
Mhm.
time?
Reserve fund transfers the way most communities do it.
Really? Okay. When it's unexpected. So that's something that
Great.
I thought we
Right.
could discuss.
so that'd be a
and
great,
put in.
yeah, that'd be a good
for
topic for us to
posterity.
deal with. Good. Looks like we have Mr. Marston I suspect, since I don't
suspect
recognize the face. Selectman from Holliston. Corey, can we let Mr. Marston give us 15 or 20 minutes, and you may learn something from this as well? Would that be great?
Sure.
Appreciate that. So, sir, if you're Jay Marston, I'm Peter
Yes.
Caruso, welcome.
Gentlemen, how are you? I apologize for my
That's all right.
tardiness.
That's Mike
Mike
Chimo.
Chimo. Hi.
How are you,
Peter
Jay?
Caruso, nice to
Jay
meet you.
Marsden.
Paul
Jay.
Lawrence's.
Yeah, our neighbors in Holliston. So I would say that we're here to learn. I would say we're a sleeping giant here, we're a sleeping bear on this issue, so, you know, one of the reasons that I was intrigued by listening to what you might have to say is, and talk about, is to help educate our residents
Sure.
here, what we should be worrying about. I don't know about, you know, whether we'll be signing anything in the immediate future, or writing any
Nope.
checks, but we
Nope.
certainly want to get smarter and then see how we go forward from there, if that sounds good with you, so.
That's perfect. That's absolutely fine.
Great.
First of all, I appreciate the time. Thank you very much. I know you guys probably have as much on your plate as we have on our plate.
Yeah, I'll bet.
You were kind enough, or you were kind enough to be receptive to the reach out to get together and sort of tell you a little bit about what we're doing. So I'll give you some of the background. I'm the vice chair of what we're affectionately calling the Metro West Anti-Casino Coalition, right? Everything has to have an acronym, so that's ours. And the purpose behind it is what happened was a couple of months ago, you know, we all know about what's going on in Milford, we all know what's going on in Everett, we all know what's going on in Suffolk. And those communities represent a little bit of a different structure. They have a little bit of a different approach to local government, and they tend to be able to do things a little bit differently than we might do them in some of the smaller towns in and around Massachusetts. And we feel, at least certainly down in Holliston, in Hopkinton, Ashland, and Medway, those are the 4 towns right now that make up the
Yep.
coalition, if you will, that, you know, we've been part of this conversation about, you know, there might be a casino in Milford, there might be a casino in Milford, you know, they want to put a casino in Milford. So we've been hearing this for a long time, and obviously sharing, all 4 of us sharing all of the same concerns around things like traffic, things like emergency personnel. You know, Holliston specifically, we have an on-call fire department. And we worry very much about, you know, mutual aid and the things that we've provided to surrounding towns over the past couple of years. And so we're asking ourselves these questions about how would a development like that impact us locally.
Yep.
And what we found was obviously that we were all sharing the same concerns, and we started to reach out individually, and we said, well, you know, you have the same concerns about water and highway that we have, and you have the same concerns about education and housing that we have. So we started to realize that we can take one of a couple of approaches. We can each individually go out and sort of follow what the Gaming Commission has set out as a blueprint for how you might deal with the developer, and we could all kind of individually go out and try to horse trade with the developer to come up with something. Or we can put together somewhat of a united front, initially with the idea that we're putting the gaming issue aside. We're not trying to make
Right.
a statement about gaming and whether it's good or bad. That ship has sailed to a certain extent. But what we are very much focused on is the idea of, is that really the best site for some type of project like that? We believe no, for a whole host of reasons. The biggest reason probably, I think, came to light this week is that there continues to be, even after this site being identified for 4 years or so as a potential place for this development, there still continues to be ongoing, what we think are major changes to the plan as it's explained to us, or how we understand what their mitigation issues are going to be. And so we got to the point where we said, you know, we're very concerned about whether or not there's going to be somebody, whether that's some of the Metropolitan Planning Council folks or whoever, that's going to say, you know what, that's a great idea. Your water plan, your transportation plan, whatever those plans are. But you know what, guess what? You can't mitigate that. Your assumptions essentially don't work. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that we came together around was this idea of feeling like we wanted to put together a group of people who, we understand what the Gaming Commission wants, and we understand the idea behind sort of walking a parallel path, which is challenging, trust but verify type of approach. Yep. And so that's sort of the approach that we've taken right now, with the idea that at some point we may actually have to sort of sit down at the table and figure out what a mitigation plan is going to look like. But until that happens, we wanted to be able to put together a group of folks that could sit down and move quickly for towns relative to the city of Boston, which can just say, we want a water study of how that impact is going to be affected, how that's going to affect this area. We want a transportation study. And really what was the driving force behind bringing the groups together was when the Gaming Commission came out to the Metro West area. They met with us in Holliston, and they sat down, and we started talking to them about all the things that we think are challenges. And one of the things that we found that it became very apparent to us very quickly was we felt there was a real lack of understanding around what our procurement policies are, and you guys know them probably better than I do, around trying to accomplish some of the things that we're very concerned about. And so we use water because it's very easy and everybody understands it, but the idea was if the developer is to come out and say, this is our water plan, right? This is what we think is going to work. For us to turn around and try to individually put together some type of opposing viewpoint, another white paper that says, we think some of your assumptions are a little bit off, you're being a little bit generous about certain things. For us to do that individually, it takes sort of a municipal act of God, right? I mean, we have to have the money available, it has to get appropriated, we would have to get into all of these things that some of these other cities and towns are not necessarily tasked with to get some of these things done. And when we had this conversation, that was when we really sort of realized that there's going to be some real challenges around us being able to respond to this individually. Now, it worked out for us from a timing perspective that this realization sort of happened as we were segueing right into town meeting season. So for the folks in Hopkinton, the folks in Holliston, it was easy for us to go to the town and say, look, what we would like to do is we would like to ask the town to appropriate a certain amount of money, essentially a credit line, if you will, that we would then have on the back burner so that if we said to ourselves collectively as this group, you know what, we've had a chance to look at your water assumptions, your transportation assumptions, whatever those assumptions are, we don't think they're either legitimate or we want a second set of eyes. We want to hire our own experts, right? Think of it as a lawsuit, if you will, right? Think of it as litigation. We want to have our own experts, but to do that obviously costs money. And so we need to, unless you're hiring a law firm, you got to go out and you got to go through the procurement process. So we wanted to have that in place already. So that was what really started this idea of pulling these four towns and anybody else who obviously as a surrounding neighbor of ours feels like that they have an interest in being part of this, with the idea that we wanted to be able to move somewhat quickly, and our initial assumption was prior to the idea of the metropolitan area planning groups taking the lead on doing some of this work and them getting involved. Now again, we still want to be able to say, look, we're gonna sort of trust and verify on our own front. But what we were tasked to do internally is to have the four groups that we've put together, and then we would go out to our neighbors and say, is this something that you feel that you want to be part of? Do you want to take a position? And we recognize that some communities may say, we want the development, we think it's great. We recognize that, so we're not trying to tell anybody how they should feel about it. But the idea being, of course, that we think from a site-specific perspective, we're not sure that's really the best place for it. We still feel like we're not, even 4 years into this project, we're still feeling like, and up until last week, it was, the project's going to go here. Well, the project can't go here for things that we would imagine should have been sort of easily identifiable. And there's been a lot of sort of, every time we raise an issue in a very casual passing manner, we get the idea that moving a major, power line structure that powers a substantial portion of the East Coast is a piece of cake. We're just led to believe that a lot of these things are very easy. What we're concerned about is exactly what we're finding out right now, which is once these decisions are made, this is not something that 6 months into this project, if they were to get the approval, that they can say, guess what, we were wrong. Our water assumptions were wildly off base. Our traffic assumptions were wildly off base. We can fix it, we can't fix it. That's it, we're stuck with the project. We're going to get it, and it's going to impact definitely us, certainly Hopkinton and those surrounding towns. We think to a certain extent it might impact, as we move further out from where the sort of the base of the operation is going to be. There's a little bit of a dilution factor, but certainly I think 16 of the traffic and things like that might have an impact. So what we had done was pull this group together, and then we've reached out to some other communities to say, we are essentially going to try to walk this parallel path. We're going to try to sort of challenge where we think challenging makes sense. We want to be able to get the right information. We want to be able to rely on the information rather than have the developer tell us how fantastic everything is going to be and how they're going to solve all the problems. And then at the same time, at some point, there may be, it's sort of a two-step process. The first part is this project here of sort of understanding the issues and whether or not they truly are mitigatable. And then also moving on at that point, where if we feel like they do move on to the second part of the application process, there would be a need to then sit down and have a conversation around what those mitigation factors are going to look like, what they're going to cost, what the developer would actually be putting on the table in the form of mitigation, and how does that mitigation, we don't want the mitigation that Hopkinton might take on their end, the whole thing is a ripple effect, right? Create problems for Holliston. Holliston doesn't want to do things that are going to create problems for Medway. So we're trying to take a much more collaborative approach, but we are by no means saying, let's work together to make this happen. That is certainly not our position, and we're not. Also, we've tried to be very respectful. I've had a conversation with one of the selectmen in Milford to say, look, we're not trying to tell Milford how to run their business. It's your town. We're respectful of your sort of local sovereignty. We understand that. We just feel like the footprint is clearly much bigger than any individual town, and we would expect the same thing if the tables were turned and we were in that same position. We would obviously expect to be getting the same type of feedback. So the purpose of my visit tonight is to kind of educate you guys on what we've been doing, what the coalition has been up to, let you know, this is sort of who we are, put a face with the name, and get a sense of whether or not, if you have questions, I'm happy to answer them. To your point, we certainly would never ask for a decision right this second. We recognize from a funding perspective, there's some people that have shown some interest, but we recognize that if they were to consider being part of it from a funding perspective, that maybe is a fall town meeting project. And certainly if they're against it, they probably are saying, hey, we can kind of go along for the ride to a certain extent, and if we need to entertain that prospect, we can do it in the fall. We've committed, Hopkinton's committed, some other, but that's generally how we've sort of set it up right now. We are in the process of interviewing a couple of law firms that we've been approached by as our town, or as this coalition, as part of this intermunicipal arrangement, and they have a substantial amount of experience. As we've discovered, it's a pretty incestuous business, or it's a pretty incestuous area, if you will, area of practice. Everybody I've talked to either knows the players, has been on this side of the table with the players, has been on this side of the table with the players. So there's a lot of, I know, we're buddies, we're kind of buddies, we've been adversaries. So we're sort of playing off of that to a certain extent, and we're going to see where it goes from there. But we've had some interest, and we're going to continue to work on that. One of the firms was in town here. They found out that they had a conflict. They couldn't be part of it, but they're going to recommend, or they're going to try to come up with some other people that they know in the business who might be willing to help us out. So that's, I don't want to steal everybody's thunder, but that's sort of what we're offering, if you will, recognizing that the further you move from the location, then the impact is a little bit muted. But I still think you guys have probably had some conversations about it. Certainly you've probably followed it, but obviously to a lesser degree than
Well, I would say to a lesser degree, at least personally speaking, we haven't focused on it very much. I see all those casino, signs out in front of a number of yards going through Holliston, even heading into Milford there. You see it in Millis and whatnot. So this is good to hear what you have to say and what your group is doing. I found this an interesting read, your intermunicipal agreement. Particularly what I found was all of the reasons that you collectively came and said, well, we believe that this will displace other local business. All the rationale that you came together, the four towns came together to say what the issues that concern you are,
Right.
and then why you're going forward with what you're doing. So that was interesting to me. But just so you could just take a broader picture. So what we're really talking about is this is just on the other side of your town line with Milford, is what I understand is where the proposed site is.
Yeah, from a location
roughly-
perspective, if you follow 16 all the way, where the
Yep.
crossroad is for 495, where it comes
Yes.
right across. On the right-hand side, there's the mine, you get a
Yep.
big federal mine sign, big rock pile, if you will.
Yep.
That's the location.
Yep.
The reason I say that is, I think a lot of folks think it's either further up 495 or off of 495. So it's literally, it's 16, it's
And 495
85.
and
You get
85.
495 that runs here, and so it's right here. The spot or the site is, depending on who you talk to, it's ballpark probably 180 acres, 187 acres Of the 187 acres, the way it's explained to us, this is a bit of a moving target, but maybe 60 acres of it is arguably somewhat protected. It's got some conservation issues. There's some wetlands up there. So if you look at an overlay of the site, there's sort of a very specific footprint that
Where they can develop and where they can't.
That's right,
Yes,
that's right.
yeah.
And then the initial planning, the way I understood it, was that if you're following Route 16 off to the right before you get to that area, there's a little neighborhood back there. They were under the impression that the buildings were going to be 2,500, 3,000 feet away from them. Given this little hiccup in the course of the last week or so with the way the power lines and some environmental issues with the Army Corps, those buildings have been shifted to the point where
Closer.
they're probably 600 feet away from those houses. So
Yeah.
obviously a bit of a game changer for those folks. And then the other issue that we're running into is that the original description of what the traffic solution was going to be based off of was, if anybody's been to Great Woods, you get on Great Woods and they have those two sort of distributor roads on the right-hand side that kind of separate the traffic out and bring you in. That was their initial game plan. Our understanding was that those were going to be on the right-hand side, and for some way, or for anybody who's been to a concert at Great Woods, I wouldn't say it's the easiest place to get in and out of, but that was going to serve as a feeder system. There's been some challenges and some problems to that, which are moving those roads back to the middle of the highway, which creates some permitting issues, Mass Highway's involved. Cimarano Drive is our example. We all know how long that took to pull together, and that was something everybody wanted. So this is something that, we're sort of looking at. And this is back to our original conversation. To address the water issue, initially it was, there's plenty of water up there. Now the story seems to be, well, maybe we'll take our laundry off site. So now if you're planning for a mitigation plan around the water issue not being a problem, now with all that laundry going off site, uniforms going off site, now you have extra traffic, now you have extra, if the water situation is that tenuous, maybe that's really not the right place for it, because as we've talked about, or as I've mentioned, once that thing goes in, there is no going back. So it's not like they're going to take their ball and go home. Yeah. So these are the things that we're trying to pull apart. We feel like we're not really running into the most consistent story about how this is going to work. And so,
yeah. So this just before, the Gaming Commission will select either this site or the Everett or the Boston site, basically.
Correct, yep.
For the metropolitan.
For the Suffolk
site.
region. They call it the Suffolk region. That's right. That's right. Yep.
And so that's still up in the air. And any sense of when that decision might come
Time frame
down?
on that is probably, I think, February is the deadline.
Okay.
So, it's 6 or 8 months away. I mean, this is a bit of a sprint. And that's also one of the reasons when we talked about our understanding of how quickly the time frame and the nimbleness with which town governments are going to be able to work.
Yes, I understand.
That was
Yeah.
one of the challenges. That was really what brought it home for us, was that we, for us to get a responsive project.
If they're chosen in February, you have your ducks in a row now. You're getting.
Well,
your
that's
ducks
right,
in a
but
row.
if we want to challenge things now, just to get some of this stuff lined up is going to take us a couple of months. That was our
Yeah.
big concern, is that,
Yeah.
and then I think they had a concern about, well,
And who's the developer again, or who?
well, it's a bit of a gray area. Our understanding is that there's an LLC that's been put together. Foxwoods is sort of the lead big name
Okay.
ticket that goes along with that. There was originally a gentleman who has some ties to Milford who was originally part of the project. He actually was arguably forced out of the project, if you will. He wrote a letter, I thought, to the Gaming Commission, went very public with it, that he thought the whole project was going to just fall apart, and he removed any and all support from the project, which was somewhat interesting. And then all of a sudden, now he's back in the project. I don't know what that means. I don't know if that's a management issue. I don't know if that's a money issue. I don't know what the story is behind it, but it shows that there's a little bit of a disconnect
Sure.
at that level. Not our problem. But still, it makes it a little bit of a challenge
It's
for
up
us
to who
to
you're
sort of-
dealing with.
Exactly,
That's right,
exactly,
yeah, yeah.
exactly.
Great. Mike, you?
Yeah,
had some thoughts?
Selectman Marsden, sounds like you know a lot about this project. Where is it in the environmental review process? Has this gone through MIPA or any other?
No, it hasn't gone through any of that yet. No, what has to happen is they have to, right now, the part one of this application process is literally, for lack of a better term, it's a background check. They want to make sure that they sort of fulfill the character component of the application process. and they fill the financial feasibility or the financial viability part of that project. The next part of that is that if they get the okay or the pass to go to the next part of the permitting, the application process, then they will then dive deeper into the information that they've provided to the Gaming Commission. But this whole process that we're talking about right now, this involves there's no determination made that's sort of site-specific. It's a little bit of a, I don't want to call it a leap, but, you know, their job is to go to the host community, in this case Milford, and say, this project works, it's viable, here's all the reasons it works. And then to your point, we're on the other side of this saying, we think that that site is going to create some environmental problems that MEP is going to have a problem with, and a lot of folks are going to have a problem with, and we don't think your timeline, and we've actually done this is something that we did at our last meeting. We went to each of the local planning boards for the folks that are on our committee and said to them, without really putting a lot of time into it, you know how these projects work, give us a permitting timeline for how long you think some of this is going to take. Because from the Gaming Commission's perspective, they are very concerned, or they're very specific about making sure that if they give a project, if they give a license to a development, they want that thing to work. They want that thing to put shovels in the ground and get that thing going. So the permitting piece of it has not even, the state has not blessed any of those
But you
projects.
mentioned they've gone to the Army Corps, they're at least talking with the Army Corps, they've gone to Mass DOT.
They've started a conversation with Mass DOT.
So just
We don't- yeah, we
conversations
don't-
at this point.
Yeah,
All right.
we don't know where, this is what, earlier on, this is one of the things that we find that's been a bit of a challenge is we don't have a fast and firm plan that says, what we do know, what we have heard is there's going to be a lot of traffic. We have a plan to mitigate the traffic. Now, the viability of that piece of the plan seems to be a moving target, and that's the part that we're running into right now. We don't, from the developer, we don't have we can absolutely do this. We've confirmed it with anybody we need to confirm. What we're running into right now is what you're mentioning is the viability of the different steps that they're going to take to make this project work are starting to individually be called into question. Now, what we are sort of on the look for is to make sure that that type of scrutiny continues and that somebody just doesn't give the project the bum's rush and say, we think they'll figure it out, because once they get the permit, arguably financially, they will try to figure it out, but the only way to figure it out at that point is going to probably be to involve a substantial amount of shortcuts and exceptions and things that probably wouldn't fly for projects that you might even greenlight in your own town. So we don't feel like we've been given the actual, here's the plan, and here is the already approved by everybody we've needed to talk to way that we're going to address each of these issues. That has not happened yet.
So, but it sounds like from Sherman's standpoint, even, I mean, this is I guess not really a request, but an introduction to this intermunicipal group, even if, you know, without making a statement one way or the other about involvement in this group, there would still be opportunities for Sherborn to learn about this process, participate in the environmental review, comment to MEPA, and watch this. I mean, I would suggest that we have some discussions with the planning board to make sure that they're at least up to speed on
What's going on?
this kind of information,
Yeah, I
and
agree.
maybe reach out to some of the agencies to let them know. Sherborn would at least be interested in knowing when things are filed, what information is out there, so we have an opportunity as a town to consider whether there are real impacts,
Sure.
potential impacts on us.
Sure.
And we're obviously happy to keep you guys in the loop on
Yeah, if
anything.
your
that-
That'd be a
town
good idea.
administrator, Paul, could keep in touch with our David here. and just,
Absolutely.
you know, periodically let him know what the developments are.
We may
so-
have different interests or different hot buttons in Sherborn than you do, but there may be ways also that we could support what you're doing or
Oh, yeah.
make different comments, so.
Yeah, I mean, and there may be things that, again, that impact you. I mean, I recognize that the ripple diminishes to a certain extent as you move away, but,
We got that big moat around our town, too, so.
big drawbridge that comes in. Thought that's the train was. Didn't the train do that? It always seems to go off while I'm going by. So that may be one of the things. I mean, those are the things that we think about first and foremost. I mean, from a public safety perspective, we feel like,
Yeah.
we're perfectly capable of managing any and all public safety emergencies as they arise right now. But to add to our potential mutual aid responsibilities, a 300 and then another 300-room hotel, we're not necessarily sure that we have the capability for that. And the way is that something that we would go into for mitigation and say, well, look, if we're going to be on the hook for some mutual aid here, we need some mitigation money to be able to provide the support so that you're providing a safe environment. I don't know if it'll ever happen, but we want to be able to respond to it. As it stands right now, I don't think not only could we handle it, I don't think we would be in a position to try to help out. I mean, it's a vastly different response than anything that we've seen up to this point. So those are the things that I think we have. And then how does that affect the relationship that we have with Sherborn and other issues that we need to worry about on that end? But I think for you guys, it's probably more a question of traffic and housing and education and some of those things. Obviously, we're a little bit more closer to the action. So,
Great. Paul, any questions or comments?
Well, a couple of things. I'm a lawyer in private practice, and one of the things I do is represent governments. Sorry, my voice is gone. But I've done a fair amount of casino work, and for example, I handled the casino situation in Foxborough on behalf of the town of Foxborough. So there's some very solid expertise here in Sherborn on how to deal with casinos. So I'm kind of balking at contributing $25,000 to hire lawyers. I'm not sure that Sherborn's anywhere near that or would need that kind of support. Secondly, under the statute, surrounding communities who are impacted have a right to a separate contract with the casino developer to mitigate the effects on our town, on each of the surrounding towns. And although interests are often aligned, sometimes the interests become competitive.
agreed.
And so there's not quite the identity of interest that might appear at first glance. If our purpose is stop the casino at any cost and we're all on that page, then we're all united on that issue. That's one thing. But if the casino is going to happen, they're going to be required to come and talk to each of the communities. And if they have $10 million that they're going to spend on mitigation, and you want 8 of it, and
Sure.
the next community wants 9 of it, and then we come along and we say, well, we have all these impacts, we find ourselves fighting for the same dollars.
Sure. And we when we started the coalition, we recognized that at some point that possibility may exist. I mean, we may get to the point where if it shows up and everybody says, well, part A of the plan was to keep it out of here, and that didn't work. Is part B now that we certainly could. We had envisioned exactly what you're saying, which at some point Hopkinton might say, I'm really impacted. Medway might say, I'm not impacted, but I'm not gonna subsidize their big win. So recognize that.
Well, the other 2 points I would make is that in my read of the situation and my communications with others who are doing this and following this thing at the Gaming Commission, I think it's very unlikely that the Milford proposal is going to ultimately be chosen. We can rank them in different ways, but the Suffolk Downs one is really a spectacular proposal, provides huge benefits in a place where it's really needed. Steve Wynn in Everett just got a favorable vote from that community.
They're all done there, yeah.
And he's prepared to put in really big dollars there. So there's some real heavy hitters for this region.
Agreed.
And as I look at all of that, I see this proposal, while viable and while having a chance, isn't as likely, and therefore it's not one that I'm going to lose a lot of sleep on. at least at this preliminary point of the game where they're just trying to qualify people on money, whether they have the resources to do a casino, whether they have anything in their background that would disqualify them and all of that. But I am interested in, communication, cooperation, exchanging information, learning, being in the loop, and as events unfold, there may be occasion when we all want to stand together. There may be occasions where we don't want to stand together. So as I look at this intermunicipal agreement and see how it really brings people in very close together. You have to contribute $25,000. You've got to have a steering committee. You're authorizing people to do things.
Sure.
That to me might be going a little bit too far, too fast for us. But that isn't to say that that wouldn't be a good idea if suddenly, Suffolk Down blows up and it's gone, and Wynn goes bankrupt, and all of a sudden we've got a real issue. So I want to keep the door open.
Understood.
And I want to have good communication, and I want to exchange ideas. And certainly, if this thing gets to the point where they're negotiating with the communities, we want to do a lot of work here to figure out how we're going to be impacted and get the maximum dollars we can for Sherborn. But that just seems so far down the track to me at this point. So I guess where I come out is I want to keep a dialogue going, but I'm not prepared at this juncture to go with the kind of agreement that you're proposing.
Absolutely.
Well, we had no expectation.
Yeah, no, that was never my expectation. I did not expect my intention to come down here was not to sort of walk away with an inked deal. That was never my intention. It was more a case of letting you guys know what we're doing, providing it to you, as a.
And I think Paul described it well, and Mike's, thoughts about making sure we have the right groups paying attention here.
Agreed. Yep.
Is a great thing. And if administrators talk to each other and so forth, I think we'll all be, at least we won't be asleep at the wheel when the time is to drive.
Yeah, and to have had the conversation and at least to have approached it, and you guys know where we're coming from, certainly feel free to keep an eye on us. We can certainly pass along any information that we have for you. Our door's always open, so you're certainly welcome to either call me or anybody, Paul, anybody on the commission or on the committee, if you will, and we're happy to share anything with you guys.
That's great. Well, really appreciate your time and educating us here this evening and hearing, getting to know us.
I appreciate
So,
it.
that's
Thanks for
terrific.
having me, guys.
Great, thanks, Jay. All right, so we'll move along to Corey. Thanks for waiting, Corey.
Wish my
For the-
voice would come back.
Well, it sounds
You
painful,
were making a good
Paul.
run at it, though, Paul. That
Yeah,
was good.
I
You're
feel-
starting to come back.
Yeah.
Going from sounding like a frog to sounding like a goat.
Yeah. That's all right. Well, Corey, how are you doing? It's been a few weeks since we last saw you, and you've been busy meeting folks and evaluating applicants and so forth, so anxious to hear how that process of the government structure task force effort is going.
I've had a lot of coffee. I heard from 14, I wound up talking to 14 people.
Yeah.
Some of them contacted me, initiated filling out the form. Some of them I contacted, and they filled out a form after the fact. I'll have to say that I was very impressed. Everyone I talked to actually could have been, I think, a contributing member on the committee had it been a 14-person committee.
Sure.
But it was a matter of putting together a good team, having a good sort of array of skills and experience. And I was also trying to do some sort of demographics about people who were brand new to local government, people who had sort of a history and knew where the bodies were buried. And in the end, put together, I think it'll be a very good group. And I really, in the conversations I had with everyone, impressed on them that this is a five-person committee on a tight timeline, and they're going to have to work really hard to set some, markers along the way and set a really good schedule and, move along. With 5 people, you can't have any folks who think big thoughts, no heavy lifting. Everybody's going to have to participate.
Right.
So I wound up with, this is in alphabetical order, is Ron Arrigo, George Shea, Kitty Sturgis, Rob Tierney, and Chuck Yon.
Uh-huh. All fine folks. And,
Who were they again? I think at the first
so
two.
Ron Arrigo, George Shea,
Kitty Sturgis, Rob Tierney, and Chuck Yon.
Rob Tierney, and Chuck Young. So I think you've selected some great ones. George Shea, one of my favorite people in town. I have many favorite people in town. But he had some conditions, as we discussed. Has he pulled those conditions aside, basically, to be a member of this committee?
And I had read the email when he talked about some of those things, had the discussion with him, and I think he will be open-minded
Okay.
about what's, what the
Wherever it goes, right?
output will be,
Yes.
right?
And are you thinking of, for next town meeting, is that this committee's task from how you've described it and organized it at this stage?
They have a sunset in the motion. So I told them that I thought that at the end of the time, they needed to have some sort of outcome or product. I'm not sure that it's going to be completed in time,
Yes.
that it can go through a really thoughtful process for next year's annual town meeting.
Yeah.
Because there's probably going to have to be a lot of work on public education, buy-in from all the participants, whatever the outcome is. So I'm not sure how realistic it will be for spring ATM. It might be
Right.
something for a
Fall
fall
meeting or
special
something,
or
yep.
for the following year.
Yep.
Corey, there were certain qualifications that they were looking for in terms of specialty skills. I know Ron Arrigo has an HR background, but I'm not sure how you filled those other ones, and it might be interesting to people to know the diversity of skills you've got on this committee.
Sure. Well, I had, George Shea's background is that he's done labor negotiation, actually. So I saw that as sort of a sideways HR background
Sure.
in addition to being an attorney. Kitty Sturgis, I don't know if you were aware, but she was a administrator in a law firm for a number of years, but she really, as far as I was concerned, brought the experience of being a former select person and also having a long memory and a long history of service, so that she has seen things from many different perspectives. Rob Tierney is sort of the newcomer. I think he has a lot of management experience and has worked in startups and from just a few people to a number of people. And so he I think is a good person to sort of introduce to public service, because I think he may have interest beyond serving on this committee.
Mhm.
This may spoil him forever, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think he's a good possibility. And Chuck Yon is also an attorney who currently is an elected member of the planning board. So kind of has I was looking for someone who was currently involved in town government, but not in one of the positions that was most likely to be directly involved with some of the recommendations that might come out of this committee. So the planning board was just arm's length enough that I thought that would be good.
Good, thank you.
That's great. Paul, any thoughts or comments?
I just had the perception that one of these was a warrior and had a very fixed position in the last round. And there was a lot of it sounded to me like emotional investment, so that it's hard for me to think that all of a sudden the positions would not be entrenched, as opposed to being totally an open mind. I mean, he was a regular attendee, he had very definite advocacy position, he pushed it very hard, and very consistent position.
You're talking about,
I don't want to mention anybody by name, but I was hoping that the group would be a little more either unengaged, or that someone who had a history of advocating for one particular position would be balanced with someone who is an advocate for a different position. But there isn't an advocate for the other position, it's just the advocate for that particular position. That isn't to say that people can't change their mind, that they may not be open. But when you've gone through so many meetings, and he was pretty much a primary advocate for a particular view, I just have reservations. I don't think that's consistent with what
Well,
town meeting was really looking for.
Yeah, Paul, I appreciate exactly what you're saying. I know, and I was almost in that same position, but I can also appreciate the fact that that individual went very deep into the learning curve on all of the organizational challenges and so forth, so that knowledge, I think, can add some value. And having worked with him in other situations, I'm okay. I have less reservation today than I might have had a month ago, or when we were dealing with this Article 23 and these other issues. I think you can add value more than detract value into this group. And Corey, just to explain to me now, once you've appointed this committee, they're off and running on their own. Your work is done here, essentially.
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, my plan, such as it is to, I'll call the first meeting.
Yep.
They all have to get sworn in, they all have to do their, conflict of interest training, et cetera. And then I will encourage them at that meeting. There's some basic resources that they all need to begin looking at.
Right.
Two of which are online at the town's website, but I'm also pulled the report from the former committee that was in the 80s,
Right.
that they can look at that.
Right.
I
Can we
would,
get that one online too? Can we get that scanned maybe?
Sure.
I mean, I think anything they're working from would be helpful to have that
sure,
posted.
sure. No, if you do that. My thought is that I was just at the meeting going to ask someone to be a temporary presider at the meeting, because I think they need to get through discussing what they see as the scope of their charge, picking out, meeting dates, something that simple, kind of looking at where they think the milestones are going to be given the length of time they have to operate. And then after that meeting, basically, I'll step aside. I think at that point, they need to elect their own
Yeah, the
the
chair and whatever
chairperson
they
and-
do, yeah.
because they need to operate like any other town committee. They need to file minutes,
Right.
record votes, all
These are
that
all
kind of
public
thing.
meetings.
Yes.
People can come watch the meetings,
They are
participate
indeed.
to the extent they're allowed.
Yeah, they're posting
Yes.
them and all that. Yeah,
Yeah.
great. Elliot, you had a question?
Yeah, for our TV audience, I think we should agree, this committee is to look in to the articles that were defeated at last town meeting for major changes in our town government. Is this correct?
Well, not exactly. This committee is charged by the motion that was made at the annual town meeting. And the motion actually did not refer to any of the articles that came up, that were on the agenda for that town meeting. They are charged with looking at issues of governance, which is can be a very broad look, which is why I said they're going to have to define what they think the scope is of their charge. But they have been directed to begin with the Collins report and the DOR report, and use that as a beginning point, with the potential output being articles that can be voted upon at a future town meeting.
Well, as I recall, I think as the town tax collector and treasurer might be combined into one.
Appointed position as
Appointed.
opposed to
Is that-
elected.
Is
Yeah,
that correct?
that's
Well,
correct.
it's-
But
And then
there-
a few
it's
similar
the-
things, and
Broader
that's
than
what this committee is going to scrutinize again and then bring back
Right.
to
There-
future town meetings.
They're going to begin with the findings and recommendations of the Collins report and the DOR report. And combining that was part of both reports, but there were other issues that were also in both
Yeah,
reports.
that's just one component of
Yeah.
one of the recommendations from
Well,
both those groups.
This meeting's being shown in many of our surrounding towns. And to say appoint a committee, I want everyone who's still watching to know that this is what this committee.
You think we have a wide audience in the surrounding towns, Elliot?
No, nobody's
All the
yet
time,
asked
yeah.
for an autograph, but, do you? Yeah, we're a great, we crack jokes once in a while, too.
Yeah, once.
How about you guys? Austin? Yeah, once. So, Paul, I think we can get you comfortable over the long run, I hope. And I think this is a good group. I'm glad you had so many people express interest. And it is a major commitment for these folks, and it's an important task they've been granted to do here.
Maybe one of the other
It's
9
pretty
wants to be on the Energy Committee, or one of the other fine
That's right.
positions that David has open.
Well, I have to admit, I have also been recruiting for advisory.
cool. Yeah, how's that going? Yeah.
Oh, dear. Well, I just want to pass along one comment, is that I did encounter during the course of having yet another cup of coffee with a potential appointee, we ran into someone from town who is a long-term resident who commented that he felt that filling out a form was kind of insulting, and that it reflected a limitation on the person who was making the appointments, that they didn't know enough people, that they had to have a form. And and we had a really interesting conversation, because I kind of pointed out that one of the problems is, it can get too much of an exclusive club
That's right.
if all you do is appoint people that you know.
No, that's right.
And that you really need to find some new people. And so I enjoyed, talking to some of these folks that I
You'd never
never met
before.
before.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
good. That's
Yeah.
great. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, good. And we're certainly ready, willing, and able to cooperate with this group at David's level, at Diane's level, and of course at our level, to
Okay.
any degree.
And thanks for coming in, too. I know that was something
Yeah.
we asked of you a month or so ago, and I appreciate that you were willing to do
Oh,
it.
No problem.
Thank you,
Talk to
Corey.
you later.
All right. All right, good. So then the best for last, I think, here is our town accountant to give us a brief description of what she's given to us to read at the 5 o'clock this afternoon here, which is the preliminary report of the fiscal 2013. And if you want to talk about highlights, Ruth, I know I have 6 guiding questions, if that helps
Want to start
too.
with your questions?
All right. So one of the things I'll ask you is just to describe the key exposure. This is preliminary, and this is subject to change. There's more information coming in, but the question is going to be what do you think one of the questions is that I have is if you are able to identify what the key exposures and the dollar magnitude that might swing these numbers. Because right now what you're showing is, if I did it right, what I call a total surplus of 750 grand, made up of 293,000 of revenue coming in better than forecasted in the budgeting process, and estimated turnbacks of about 455. So you're looking at 750 grand. Last year's similar number was about 800, just over 800. So we're almost at the same level as last year. And so to the extent there are exposures that might reduce that or increase that, that are of any material nature, you don't know of any of those
I
at
don't
this
know of
stage?
any. All the revenue is in and recorded, all the expenditures, all
Okay.
that warrant is in.
So we don't expect anything to bite us in the
I'm hoping not.
rear end.
I have to go back and review everything.
Okay,
but-
yeah. You have a section here about CM&D expenses. I just want to make sure David and you are on the same page of what you're talking about, of what's going on there, because I still am confused about that. You've listed the items that have balances, and I add those balances up, and it's 94,000, but then you say you got turnbacks of 454. You don't describe in there
I didn't go to
the
all of them.
school stuff and all of that.
I just
I would-
highlighted ones that had money transferred into them
Yeah,
to show that they actually.
right. And you give us schedules that show where the bulk of it comes from, or where they all come from. And there's the big number on the school thing. I ask you again to be look closely at that and try to explain that to us, more, where that's coming from. Pine
where-
Hills, 242,000, which I say to you is the end result of circuit breaker, and that's maybe the wrong term for me to be using. I'll call it state aid related to out of district that
What do you,
somehow, I'm looking at your turnback numbers
the turnback number
for
for
Sherborn School.
242,000, and
Right.
last year it was 251. They're almost
Yeah,
identical.
so it's really just a clear explanation of how that's coming about, at least from my perspective. We don't need to do it tonight, okay?
Okay.
All right. And then you give a projection of free cash of what we do expect. I still want to know if we've ever reconciled. We were projecting free cash for last year all the way up through April, and then the number increased to 150 grand. Did we ever figure out why it bumped up to what the state actually certified? So that we're.
Because every number I gave you was an estimate based on a lot of variety of things.
Okay, I don't want to
So
fight that
I
battle.
don't
I don't want
have-
to, I don't want to go into that battle right now.
Okay,
All I
the
just want to
answer's
say
no.
is, let's be sure we're, you and he and me, how's that? Are comfortable with where we're at, knowing that we had a big uptick last year that was a good surprise, but a surprise, it's better to not be
Can I just make
surprised.
a statement right now that everything I
please.
do is estimated?
Yes,
Estimated and
yes,
draft, and they are all subject to change as the picture develops.
all right, and this is one of the most exciting parts of our meeting, I'm sure, for the viewers and so forth, when we get into all this stuff, but it is important, it's other people's money we're talking about, so it's good. So, so those are my concerns that we'll continue to talk through as life goes on here, okay? And as you fine tune this, I will leave it to you and David to whether you're comfortable putting this report up on the website, given that it's preliminary. She's saying no. I'm happy to hold. I think most people, when they look at something the first
yeah,
time
just-
around, are gonna run with it,
The
so.
expenditure report I gave you, I had to make some changes in the fiscal
Yeah.
12 stuff.
So when
and
you're ready to,
Two additional things came in.
when you're ready to reissue this
I'll-
in
yeah.
final form, that's what we'll put up on the website. How's that?
Mhm.
Okay, and maybe you'll address some of these other turnback items, particularly the big ones, in narrative form. How's that?
Oh, okay. Because
Okay.
I did do a spreadsheet to.
Yeah, the spreadsheet's there, but I just
No,
want your
one you haven't seen yet.
explanation. Okay, excellent. So that's all I had. So if you have some highlights, and then these gentlemen can certainly ask questions, but I doubt they've had too much time to look this
I've
over
been reading
anyway.
it while you've been talking,
Yeah.
Peter, so I haven't listened to you or figured out what's on the paper. So it's-
Well, you don't listen to me anyway, so it's a beautiful thing. I get that all the time. So. Just kidding. So what other highlights would you like to point out, Ruth?
Just that the surplus that we had last year and the surplus this year has decreased.
Yes,
The turnbacks are less,
yes,
but not by a lot, but it's just that everything is less.
right.
So, and there are a variety of reasons why. So the expectation is that free cash will be less,
Right.
but not by a lot.
But last year's free cash was what?
1.1.
1.137, there it is, yeah. And so you're saying it might be 200 grand less or so?
It could be, but I haven't got.
But you haven't looked at that.
There's a lot more work I have to do to get to that point.
Understand. Understand.
This is basically reports on what revenue looks like and what the expenditures look like.
Right.
And
Okay. So are we seeing any recurring themes? I mean, yes, we do in terms of that big number there at the school for the
This-
turnback. On the revenue side, where if we look at what we did for fiscal 14's budgeting, we probably squeezed things a little bit more than what we're showing here, so that
it's-
we would envision less surplus on the revenue side, at least I would.
that's correct,
Okay.
especially when some of the anticipated revenue is probably not going to happen.
Right, right, right,
Yeah, so there will be unless there's unexpected
right.
revenue from sources we haven't identified.
In that revenue surplus, though, does that include that overlay release? That was all
Not in
free
the-
cash. It's not in the revenue, right? That was just a free cash
That's an
offset.
adjustment that will show up elsewhere.
Okay, so it's not, okay.
It's not
I just
in
want to be
here.
sure it's not in that $294,000.
No.
Okay. Okay. What else can you tell us, Ruth? I mean, so, you know, there are schools of thought, when you come in and say, well, we're looking at a total surplus of 750 grand, you can say, well, that's great, because it helps replenish the free cash kitty, but you can also say, geez, did we overtax our residents? So, there's always that, but on a $25 million budget, that's not a big number.
That's
so,
really not a lot of money.
Yeah. Understand.
It's practically a dead-on hit.
And I think, again, we've probably squeezed it further. We budgeted closer to
Yeah. And
reality
if you
going
recall,
forward.
when the auditor was here, and the DOR always recommends very conservative estimates in revenue,
I understand.
just to
understand.
remind you.
Yeah. I hear you. Okay, Paul, do you have any questions? I don't know if you had a chance to look at this closely. And I know you had asked previously, Paul, for some types of scheduling of well, this is a year-to-date one anyway, so I think that's what we're dealing with.
Do I have questions? No, my concern is, this is fiscal year 2013 through June, and I assume when you say through June, you mean the end of June? So it's the
Yes.
entire
It's the whole
fiscal year?
Yeah.
And it reflects this warrant
Yes,
54 as
yes.
well, right?
Well, does it, I mean, it says it doesn't, so that's,
It says it doesn't,
Oh,
I thought it said it does.
It includes the warrant, which has not been, had at the time, had
Approved.
been approved.
so it's finalized, okay.
Yeah,
good.
I mean, it's all the numbers are in there.
Is this the last warrant? There'll be no more?
No, no more. Nothing after the 15th.
And you've captured all the reserve fund transfers, you've
Yes.
captured all the supplemental, you've captured everything in there, the encumbrances, all that stuff.
The,
So you're not likely to get any additional encumbrances
There's
on
a
anything?
chance that if a bill comes through that I can't pay and there's still time left to encumber
I
it,
saw this had a June transfer station, we remember that was
that's all
one
up
of
to
those
date.
things
I
that we
counted.
missed a month one year and
Yep.
doubled up another.
Well, that's what I was wondering, just procedurally, you have said a couple times things could change, they're rough estimates, but I would think at this point, we should be pretty close, right?
Well, revenue and expenditures are pretty close. There's a lot of other factors that go into the final financial statements. I have to go through there's a lot more funds involved that, there's just a lot of pieces of the puzzle. These are the final, with very minor adjustments, the expenditure and revenue piece.
But again, you don't envision anything of a material nature
Not
to
on
swing
these,
these
no,
numbers, right?
No, not unless, so what happens after that warrant gets posted, we'll distribute reports to all the departments and they can review the information. So the worst thing that could happen is
So
we
somebody
charge
may
the
say,
wrong-
oh, you had this in the wrong place.
Right, it could
Or you're
be
missing
another fund or.
at a trip,
Right.
whatever, yeah, okay.
But most of it will be really minor.
Yeah.
And what are the funds that aren't in here? Just
Well, this is just a general
the
fund. We've
specialized
got all
funds?
the special revenue
Okay.
funds. There's trust funds, there's capital project funds, and the Chapter 90 funds.
Okay, and those are all accounted for separately than this?
Yeah,
But you'll be able to provide us that, sort of that section.
yeah, and they
there.
don't, well, they don't.
It's in here, a little bit of it's in here, isn't it? Yeah. But that's
Some of the
that's
articles
below
are-
the line
Yeah,
stuff.
those are the cash articles, not
Okay, yeah, yeah,
borrowing.
yeah. Okay.
From a policy position, I'd like to see our free cash number certified a lot earlier than it
Yes.
was last year and the year before and the year before. And I'm drawn to this part of your report where you're projecting free cash to be around 900,000. And earlier you had said that turnbacks for this year is 454, whereas last year it was 497. So it's down, the turnbacks are down by about
41.
41,000 less than the year before. The other component of turnbacks is revenue coming in, for example, that higher than expected. But when you look at well, let me ask it the other way around. How are you figuring out on this 900,000? What are the components that you're?
The other pieces are the deferred revenue and receivables on real estate. Those are the other components. Plus, some things impact directly on the fund balance, which I haven't got to that point because it's too early in the game for me to have done everything all at once. So I was really focusing on making sure the budgets got in without running over. That was like my big number one focus, and getting the revenue done so I could see where we stood. But there's a lot of other factors. But when I did that off the cuff thing, I just took the surplus with the revenue, the turnbacks, and the receivables are deducted.
And in terms of the plan to get us to the free cash number, what are the big milestones that we'd be looking for?
I like to, milestones in,
You're talking about
Not sure.
Do
procedurally,
you have to
Paul?
have
Procedure.
certified
I'm talking about
audit? Do
procedures.
you have to have certified audit numbers like?
No.
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 So you
No,
can submit.
The process is, the first thing that happens is Yvonne and I have to do the tax recap so we can get a tax rate set. That's like number one. Then I have to do Schedule A, and I like to do Schedule A and the certification at the same time, because Schedule A brings out things that I might have missed or misclassified, or I like to do them together. Since Schedule A is due in October, that's my goal.
So do you think that we'd be able to submit something to Department of Revenue to certify our free cash in October of this year?
I'm hoping so, unless something comes up that
So last year, I think it went in
February,
February. And so there's a swing there of 5 months.
right.
I very much appreciate the October deadline or milestone as being a significant improvement. It makes a much better planning tool for advisory and for us to know how much money we have in free cash that might be used for some expenditures. What can we do as a board to help you get into the end zone in October?
I haven't answered for that, but I'm,
What, leave you alone?
She wants me
That's
to
the
stop
answer.
asking questions.
stop asking, tell Peter to stop asking me to look
Yeah.
at everything else under the sun.
It's not gonna happen. No, but Paul, I mean, we established a financial policy on
Right.
free cash timing
I know.
of, well, I think it was 5 months after the end of the fiscal year, 4 or 5 months after the end of the fiscal year, so. We certainly didn't get there last year, so we're excited to think that we might get closer to that policy objective this year. And Paul's right on. All of the pieces of the puzzle fall into place more easily with the knowledge of what the free cash number is. Now, you could argue, sometimes it's better to hold that closer to the vest until you,
I just don't want you spending it all, that's
because
all.
some people might want to spend it, that's right.
Right.
But
And the DOR is really emphatic about how free cash is used.
no, and I think we're free cash conservative-minded folks for the most part as a town and as a board.
Well, it's been getting better,
So-
the amount used to reduce,
And advisories, drawn some of their lines in the sand on that,
yeah,
so.
it's getting much better.
But Paul's a good politician. He's saying, how can we help you
Yeah,
achieve what we want you to do? What we really want you to do, So,
I gave you an answer.
and certainly we have David to help that
I'll
process as
have,
well.
I'll have David
Yeah.
answer all your questions.
There you go, that's fine. Well, this is great to get this done so quickly, and I know you've also provided it to one of the regional school committee members because they're having some budget workshop next week,
Right.
which is important. And I can tell you, I've been attending as the board's representative for the school committee, the school contract negotiation team. I've been attending in some of those meetings, and some of this financial information will be useful to help show Sherborn's financial situation. So it's good to have it timely, and I don't know if the person you gave this to from the school committee will have questions. I suspect so, and I know you're
I would guess.
quite helpful to answer. I appreciate that.
Okay.
And, so I don't have anything further for Ruth, if you guys don't. Gents?
No,
Thanks very much for coming in, Ruth. This is great. We do want to try to do this every month,
I know,
as
I
we
heard.
said, and how
Might
can
be
we,
more
as
difficult
Paul
in the
says,
summer.
how can we help you do this every month,
Well, Peter, let me ask you a question about every month on this. I mean, this gets down to the level of things that were $100 and
Right.
so forth. I mean, do we need something at this level of detail, or do we want the high points every month?
Well, we certainly want the high points, and I think if you have any thoughts of what you'd like to see, this really has been a step forward, rather than getting all these sheets with a bit. bajillion
Absolutely.
things on
I
it.
think
Ruth
the
helps
narrative
make
is
it
great.
clear.
I'm not sure,
Even a
all
higher
of
level,
this is
that's
as
right,
helpful
right.
from a policy standpoint, or even from the standpoint of Ruth's time, where she has
Right.
other things to do, like
Right.
answer your other questions, so.
Well, I think we can scrub it further, and we have somebody to help us scrub it further, so that would be good. Just because we want it to be most impactful for the three of us to be alert to what's going on in a timely manner, as well as having something available to throw up on the website that folks who might be interested can check it out, as well as other committees that want access to town financial information in a way that they can understand. That's where we're trying to get to, and I think your
great.
questions are right on point with that, Mike, so.
I'm open
You're
to
right.
suggestions.
We don't need to know cents, we don't need to know hundreds of dollars, it's in thousands
There
and
are
what's
things we can
important. Right,
influence and things we can't influence, and
Right.
things that are gonna
right,
be problems, and things that really are just kind of rounding.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, thanks very much, Ruth.
Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you, Ruth.
And I don't think there's anything further on the agenda here, gentlemen, so this might be a wrap.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Well done, gents, thanks
All right,
again for
great.
your assistance, and I hope your voice comes
All
back, Paul.
Cut the cameras.
I should have apologized at the beginning about my voice.
Your voice is
No.
coming along. The more you use it, it's getting clearer, Paul. It's good. Need some lemon water or something like that.